Chicago Tonight, Black Voices is made possible in part by Fifth Third Bank and by the support of these donors.
At Fifth Third, we believe when diverse voices are heard and empowered, communities are made stronger, lives are made better, and the future holds greater promise for all. That's why we're proud to support Chicago Tonight Black Voices. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can drive change.
Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight Black Voices. I'm Angel Ito. Brandis Friedman has the night off. Thanks for sharing a part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight, the push to the polls is underway as primary election day approaches. What voters need to know. Activists are hitting the pavement to raise awareness for missing and murdered Black women and girls. A former Cook County warden calling for safer prisons. She lays out her vision for a more holistic criminal legal system. And Cook County is leading a conversation on racial equity as we look towards commemorating Juneteenth. And meet Melody Angel, one of the new promising musicians playing at this weekend's Chicago Blues Festival. First off tonight, primary election day in Illinois is quickly approaching. And with voter access potentially being an issue, civic engagement groups are ramping up efforts to get people to the polls. Knowing where to vote is expected to be a challenge. 73 precincts across Chicago have no designated polling place due to pandemic-related closures. Now, voters affected by this will have to vote by mail, vote early, or go to a site open to their entire ward on Election Day, June 28th. Joining us now with more are Stevie Valles, Executive Director of Chicago Votes. That's a nonprofit working to get young people engaged in civics. And Chandra Van Dyke, the Chicago Project Manager at Change, Illinois. Now, Chandra, let's start with you. What do you see these polling closures doing in terms of how it will impact voters?
Ultimately, it's another barrier that prevents people from getting to the polls. We know there are a lot of challenges that people already face when it comes to getting to the polls to vote in the first place. And now we see that there would be challenges regarding to knowing where to actually go to vote. And that just seems to just be another barrier to prevent people from really turning out to vote in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Stevie, let's jump to you. Another change that we're seeing this year is the election taking place in June instead of March to accommodate the delayed 2020 census data. Now, do you think this new date will impact voter turnout at all?
I think it will have an impact. I'm not sure what that impact will be quite yet. I think that there are a lot of great things that can happen with the election happening in summertime. Usually when we're voting in Chicago, it's freezing cold. So hopefully with the sun being out, people will feel more energized and want to turn out to the polls. But one thing, for us, we focus on engaging young people. So a boundary we've had to navigate is the fact that high schools and colleges aren't in session this close to the election. So we had to do a lot of our turnout work for high schools and colleges in May, but it's opened us more capacity for us to focus on engaging youth who are in communities. And so we're really excited about that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. And now, Chandra, with the changes this year as far as new congressional district maps and a new voting date and now polling closures, what is Change Illinois doing to make sure people have the knowledge they need to make sure their voices are heard?
So we've been doing a lot of work to really focus on educating communities across the state about the importance of being engaged, sharing information online where people can locate their new districts and see where they're located, and sharing information about voter registration to ensure people know they can do early voter registration, just really trying to educate communities about all of these different resources and information that they need to ensure that they get to the polling location, know where they're polling, so know their new districts, know that early voting is an option for them and that it started May 26th. Also have information about being able to request to vote by mail. just really trying to share resources to ensure that residents know what's necessary to get to the polls to vote so we can see a higher voter turnout.
And Stevie, how about you? What kind of work have you and Chicago Votes been doing to increase voter engagement and help people vote?
Yeah, so every year, this is really a core part of our mission is turning out young people between 17 and 35 to vote. We distribute millions of nonpartisan voter guides to young people across the city so they know who's on the ballot and the stances they have on key issues that matter to them. We try to make voting fun. We're hosting parties at the polls in North Lawndale and Inglewood and Woodlawn over the course of this next week. So there'll be gardening, barbecues, music, mural painting, a lot of fun ways to bring people out to where they can actually cast their ballot. We lead parades to go vote with young people in high schools and colleges. We recruit young people to be election judges if they've already voted or already plan on voting so they can still be engaged. And so we just try to meet everybody where they are and provide like fun and innovative ways for people to not only feel knowledgeable enough to participate, but to feel like participating is actually fun. So
it does sound like a lot of fun. Now, Chandra, for the upcoming primary, Illinois voters are choosing party nominees for statewide offices, state lawmakers, congressional representatives, plus countless other races, all setting the stage for the general election in November. Why do you think it's important to engage in the civic process now rather than waiting until the fall?
Well, because one, there's a lot of confusion around where to vote in the first place. And I think voters need to take advantage of this opportunity to learn as much information about their new congressional districts and what voting will look like in the fall, and using this as an opportunity to really get educated, because there are a lot of different miscommunications going on. There's just a lot of barriers that are being put forth for voters to get out for the June 28th election in the first place. COVID has its issues and a lot of other barriers for communities. So it's really important for people to engage now and to make sure they're best prepared for the fall, because there are a lot of important decisions that need to be made in both elections. And so we want to ensure that people use this as an opportunity to engage and educate themselves now so they're best prepared as we look forward to future elections.
Stevie, let's jump back to you. Voter turnout during midterm elections tends to be lower than presidential elections, and according to Fair Vote in Illinois, 67% of eligible voters showed up for the 2020 presidential race compared with 58% in the 2018 midterms. Why do you think this is?
I think most people in America, when you talk about voting, the first thing that comes to their mind is voting for president. And so I think part of the reason why there's such a high turnout in presidential elections is because that's the biggest election that you get to participate in as an American voter. I feel like it's very important for us as advocates and organizers to do all that we can to infuse our society with a culture of civic education and participation, so that people understand that these local elections are all the more impactful. These midterm elections matter a whole lot, and what you do post-elections matters as well. And so that's why we don't just run programs during general elections. We try to engage our base around every election and even beyond the elections. And in recent history, young people have turned out at pretty high rates during midterms as well. So we're hoping that this summer election, with the sun being out, encourages people to turn out and engage. And we hope that over the course of the past 5 years and how we've been participating, that civic culture is starting to be built here in Chicago, that sees more people turn out during midterm elections, and we can start to balance that out a bit.
I do want to correct myself here. I noted that I said 58% in 2018, but it was actually 52%, and I'm so sorry that we are out of time now. But thanks to Stevie Valles and Chandra Van Dyke.
Bye. Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
And a reminder that Illinois primary election is less than 3 weeks away. Be sure to check out our 2022 voter guide, launched this week. There you can hear from the candidates in their own words on why they want your vote. You can also find your polling location on Election Day. It's at WTTW.com/voter guide. Activists fighting to raise awareness for missing and murdered Black women and girls in Chicago are holding a march in Chicago this Tuesday. Now, several organizations are teaming up for the 5th annual We Walk for Her event. We asked organizers what they hope to accomplish.
I would say more urgency, more sense of urgency from our city officials and state reps who can make the necessary changes in law so that Black and brown women are protected and that our communities are being surveillanced, but in a positive way so that we can keep track of who's coming in and out of our community and then not using that surveillance to criminalize our Black and brown women and children who may end up missing or place blame on them. We need to know what's happening in our communities as far as surveillance, and when someone is last missing, we need to know their whereabouts, who were they last seen with, so on and so forth, and get as much information as possible.
We hope to continue to bring awareness. We want to get the attention of the mayor and the governor. We want them to join our community task force. We want acknowledgement from the people that can make a difference. We need some communication also from the community members and law enforcement. So once that is established and the communication is being made, then maybe we can start to see some changes.
Again, the walk is this Tuesday at 5 p.m. and you can visit our website, WTTW.com/news for more details. Up next, Paris Schutz speaks with a former Cook County jail warden who's calling for a more holistic criminal legal system. Stay with us.
Do inmates in Illinois prisons and jails have a right to feel safe? And that's a central question raised in a new publication written by former Cook County Department of Corrections Warden Nika Jones-Tapia. In it, Jones-Tapia makes the case for a more holistic health and safety vision for those in custody. This after COVID ravaged through corrections facilities here in Illinois and across the country. And joining us now is Dr. Nika Jones-Tapia. Dr. Jones-Tapia, thank you for being back here with Chicago Tonight. So the initiative here that you're spearheading is called Do I Have a Right to Feel Safe? A holistic vision for safety among inmates. Tell us what this vision encompasses.
Well, it encompasses a wide array of holistic supports for not just people incarcerated, but for staff and for the larger community as well. It's predicated on accountability and consideration for the resources and supports that people need to thrive and to be well.
And you, as we mentioned, the former warden, you're a psychologist by trade. I remember Sheriff Dart saying that Cook County Jail was the largest mental health facility in the state just because of the nature of what inmates were going through. So how did your experience at Cook County Jail inform what you want your vision here to be?
Well, I think my first experience with the carceral system was really when I was a young child, and I learned early on that the justice system and specifically jails and prisons cause damage to individuals and families and communities. And it was when I started working in corrections that really, I say, two core learnings emerged. And the first was that we as a society had grown complicit in the criminalization of trauma. More than 98% of men and 99% of women who are incarcerated in correctional facilities across the country are exposed to trauma, overexposed to trauma. And I also learned that these systems were damaging staff. Staff witness and experience violence at alarming rates. And so I knew when I joined Chicago Beyond that we were well equipped from a community standpoint to really push for a system level change to how we do business.
And can you give us some of the specifics in Cook County Jail? I mean, there was a lot of changes that happened when you were there, but what are the further changes that you want to see?
Well, I have to say that it's not limited to Cook County Jail. What we have across this country is, I think it's trauma and toxicity that's woven into the very fabric of all correctional institutions, jails and prisons. And that toxicity like I said before, impacts the people incarcerated in ways that have reverberating impacts to not just them, but their families, the same as staff. And so some of the changes we want to see include empowerment of people who are most impacted by these systems so that the expertise to change them is at the table when we are making some of the reforms that are necessary.
Tell us the toll. You briefly mentioned this, but the toll not just taken on those in custody, but the folks that work in the carceral system.
Yeah, you know, people who work in jails and prisons across the country have disproportionate rates of substance use, disproportionate rates of marital and relationship discord, high rates of death. They have, unfortunately, a life expectancy that is 20 years lower than the general population. So by very nature of their work, people are dying for this paycheck, and correctional staff are speaking out about it.
Certainly, it's incredibly stressful work. In the American criminal justice system, there's been a focus on how white inmates are treated differently than black or brown inmates. Did you see that at Cook County Jail, and what is the situation across the country?
Every person entering into a correctional institution is impacted by the darkness that exists within correctional institutions. Are people treated differently within correctional institutions based off of the color of their skin? Absolutely. We see that same thing happening in our communities. You know, Black and brown communities have historically and currently have had significant disinvestment. And so when I say that we as a society have grown complicit in the criminalization of trauma, we've really grown complicit in the disinvestment in Black and brown communities and not ensuring that Black and brown people have the resources that they need on the front end, so we are not trying to punish them on the back end.
You know, in recent years, Mayor Lightfoot and Police Superintendent Brown have sought to blame a lot of the current spike in violence on bail reform, and they're saying more folks are out on the streets and they reoffend, and the population of Cook County Jail has come down. From your vantage, does that ring true at all to you?
You know, when we tell stories of crime in our communities, we really have to tell the whole narrative. And the narrative does not start with the crime and the person committing the crime. It really starts with exclusion. And we as a society are the perpetrators of that exclusion. Exclusion from quality education, exclusion from quality mental and physical health care, economic opportunities. And what these tough on crime statements and this rhetoric does is further exclude people. And as we continue to push people further and further in the margins of society, as if they are something to be tossed away, as if they are something to be locked away, a problem to be managed, then we are going to continue to see trauma manifested through violence.
When you saw what COVID did to jails and prisons across the country, including at Cook County Jail, does this sort of play into your notion here that there needs to be a holistic rethinking of the safety of folks that are in custody, because clearly so many of them were not safe from the virus?
Absolutely. We as a society need a fundamental shift in the way we view jails and prisons and the people within them, the people incarcerated in them, as well as the staff. And we didn't see that when COVID-19 ravaged jails and prisons and people in them. We did not have a system in place so that stakeholders in the justice system, including the people most impacted by this, could have a voice at the table that was making decisions to spare lives. Instead, we had a pendulum shift where it was a lot of blaming happening across the country of who was responsible, and the outcome of that was lives. And so we really need to get in front of this issue that we have in this country in terms of mass incarceration, and really think about not just investment in communities, but real decarceration.
All right, Dr. Nika Jones-Tapia, very important work that you're doing, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Back with more Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, right after this.
The Chicago Blues Fest runs through Sunday in Millennium Park and a few locations around town. A local singer-songwriter has been going to the festival since her mother took her in a stroller. And now she'll be on stage, and Mom will be watching from the wings. Melody Angel, yes, that's her real name, has blues in her DNA. Producer Mike Fratelli has the story.
If you really love music, you must also love the blues. It is the baseline for every form of music we have in this country, even hip hop. It's fairly uncommon to see black female guitar players. I'm fighting for the young girl that comes up to me, the young black girl that comes up to me all the time and says, I want to play like you, I want to do this. I feel it's my job to make that easier for her.
One person who made it easier for Melody Angel was her mother, who's also her manager and sometimes stylist.
It's a bit overwhelming sometimes to see her and all that she can do, you know, seeing her as a little bitty baby and grow. But I saw this spark in her. It was kind of undeniable.
Angel still plays the Fender Stratocaster her mother bought her at a pawn shop.
I will never forget the day she came home from that pawn shop, okay? It changed my life. Of course, I cried like a baby. I remember thinking, okay, one day I'm gonna be on stage with this guitar, you know, playing for thousands of people. That happened. So I'm like, when little kids say their dreams out loud, it's not a small thing. It's a big thing. It can actually come true.
The lifelong South Sider has carried her guitar from Europe to Australia. She has also acted on stage at Court Theater and the Goodman. And she just released her latest LP of original material.
One of the things I learned about writing was from the artists that I loved. And when I listened to them in their interviews, they always talked about being true to themselves. And that's how I look at songwriting. It's this peaceful release. Whatever's on my heart, whether it's good or bad, I can release it.
Melody Angel comes from a musical family. Her mother's cousin was Otis Rush, the late Chicago bluesman.
I do admit I didn't want her to really go into it because I know how difficult this industry is. But when you come here, you have to do what your purpose to do. So it's no way I would come in between that. I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to perform in front of people again. And that in itself is a triumph for me.
For Chicago Tonight Black Voices, this is Mark Vitale.
Now, Melody Angel just released her new record, Foxy. She and her band play 2 sets at the Chicago Blues Fest this weekend. Find out more on our website. And Juneteenth will be recognized as a federal, state, and local holiday for the first time this year. The day recognizes the freeing of the last enslaved people in Texas 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation in 1865. Now, to mark Juneteenth, Cook County is hosting a 2-day conference focused on racial equity at Malcolm X College. Events include a movie screening, career and health fairs, a blood drive, and panel discussions on topics around education, health, wealth, and justice. Cook County Commissioner Dennis Deere says he's been working to make Juneteenth a county holiday and opportunity for education since he became a legislator in 2017.
As a young kid growing up on the west side of Chicago, I had never heard of Juneteenth before. It wasn't until I went to Jackson State University to college, which is an HBCU, that I heard about Juneteenth. And it was when I decided to stay over the summer and so I can graduate a little bit earlier. And someone invited me to a Juneteenth festival. And I said to them, June what? And they said Juneteenth. And I went to the festival, and long story short, learned all about Juneteenth and what that meant, and the freedom, the last of the slaves to be free. And I've been thinking about it ever since. It's all about the Black community celebrating our freedom, but not only freedom of our physical being, freedom economically, freedom from an educational standpoint, freedom from a public safety standpoint, and freedom of and liberation of education.
The Juneteenth Conference takes place June 16th and 17th. And be sure to join us next Saturday for Black Voices, a Juneteenth special. We'll examine historical ties to slavery in Chicago, the fight for reparations, and celebrate Black culture. And that's our show for this weekend. For all of us here at Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, I'm Angel Ito. Thank you for sharing a part of your weekend with us. Stay healthy and safe. Good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.